Back in our Mojave zone, we're now at mid-elevation in a pinon juniper forest. Pinon juniper, sagebrush, scrub forest, but we're down in a shady area before the sun comes up over the ridge. See here, the east-facing ridge ahead of us. It's already in the sun, and the drainage is not too far away. So this is an area that gets decent moisture. And here I spotted on the side of the road a fruiting sumac or lemonadeberry. There's some other names for it that in English I don't really care for that much, but lemonadeberry, lemonberry, three-leafed sumac. In Navajo, it's chilchin, sivapi in Hopi, and the berries, as I recall, are referred to as suvi. So they had a different name, or they have a different name for the plant and the berries. So the berries look attractive and are tasty, but to call them a food is, well, they're more like a flavoring. And in fact, that's how they were used. I should say that's how they are used in the Middle East, where there's a related species of rhus, R-H-U-S. There's a related species of rhus throughout the Middle East that goes into the spice called za'atar. So it's these red berries are dried and then ground into a powder. So perhaps you've had that at a Persian restaurant or something similar, and it lends a tart flavor to the food. And a beautiful, rich, deep red color. Traditionally in the Southwest, people have made their own version of lemonade with these berries, and it's best to do so as a cold infusion. So to gather some in the morning and then set them in some cold water throughout the morning, and then strain it out, and by midday or in the afternoon you can drink a tart and refreshing beverage that as sugar or honey was available to people, they would sweeten it and add ice as well. So because this bush is so full of fruit, the leaves aren't so prominent. The leaves are pretty tiny. Really exceptionally small. Let's see if I can get... Okay, so Rhus trilobata has been reclassified as aromatica because when you crush these leaves, see how tiny they are? When you crush these leaves, they have a strong aroma. We have some slightly larger ones over here, but trilobata, because it's 3 lobes on the leaf, on the leaflet. Although it seems everything I'm seeing on this bush is just 1, 2, and 3 leaflets. There are plants, some that I was just with in Utah yesterday or last week, that were they had secondary leaflets below as pairs below the terminal 3 leaflets. So that made it a little bit more reassuring, especially without berries, to confirm that you don't have a poison ivy. Now, when you start to get, I'll pan out a little bit, when you get a shrub this big, anybody who knows much of anything about poison ivy in the Southwest, or anywhere for that matter, knows that it's not going to turn into a shrub, relatively square shaped shrub like this. So poison ivy in the Southwest, especially in this region, is only going to be like a knee high to maybe slightly higher than that, single stem, slightly branched plant that is popping up along the ground from runners underneath. Nothing this complex or this thick. But they are in the same family, and they once shared the same genus. I still refer to poison ivy as toxicodendron, and I believe there's a different classification for it now. But this is still Rhus, R-H-U-S, and they are both in the Anacardaceae, and that's the cashew family. So this is a family known to cause irritation in sensitive individuals, whether touching the skin or upon ingesting some part of it causes a reaction. The fruit of the cashew, the fruit that covers the nut, is extremely irritating and caustic. It will start to burn your flesh if you consume it, like burn your lips and raise blisters on your tongue. And mango can have that effect for some people, which is also in that family. So I'm not aware of anyone having any sort of reaction to lemonadeberry. But if you're a person that reacts strongly to mango or cashew, or have had severe poison ivy reactions, then I would certainly proceed with caution if you haven't tasted it before. This is a really nice mature bush with lots of berries on it. Sometimes you might have to go to 15, 20 bushes to find this many berries. And these are in a pretty good state. So if I get one of them in my hand here, there's these are starting to dry, so they've probably been ripe for maybe a couple months at this point. The berries they have flavor on the outside, and there's no juiciness on the inside. So to eat it is more a practice of removing the outer skin and then taking in that flavor and then spitting out the hard shell of which contains the seed from within. Otherwise, these could be kept whole to be made into the tea that I was describing, that can be used either just as a cooling tart beverage, or you can also apply it medicinally. And then culinarily, you can also grind these up into a powder as a replacement for Middle Eastern za'atar. Medicinally, one of the ways that these could be applied is as an astringent for the mucous membranes. They seem to have an affinity for the genitourinary tract and may be mildly astringent, certainly on the gut as well as the respiratory tract, but primarily genitourinary. Other parts of sumac can be taken as a tea as well for that purpose, leaves and stems. So that could be as an astringent for incontinence, mild case of incontinence, inability to withhold urine, restrain the release of urine. Could also be mildly antiseptic for the urinary tract. So would make a nice addition to a postpartum tea as well for tonifying genitourinary tract. Great. This is also a favored basket plant by many indigenous peoples throughout the Southwest. Some may use it as the warp and the woof, if I remember my terms correctly. But the people I've spoken with personally, they use it as a thin branchless wreath, or withy, some say, W-I-T-H-E, that goes around the top and forms the rim of the basket and then can be wrapped around. Other people have used steel or copper in the past. And yucca would be one of the plants that may be used to wrap around this plant to make the basket. So there's another, I'm going to try to walk around the plant and give you another perspective. There's another application that is verified by scientific research, as well as some traditional usage, or modern traditional usage. There's another one next door which doesn't have as much fruit, and you see its leaves are more full. Yeah, that's a lemonade berry right there as well. The leaves can be applied topically to herpes sores, cold sores in the mouth, genital herpes as well. You can dry the leaves to make a powder and dust it onto the sores. You can also make an infusion of the leaves that then could be swished around in the mouth, or the affected areas could be soaked. You do not need alcohol extraction, but you could do a water ethanol extraction, a basic alcohol tincture with some water added, and that also could be applied, but that may be uncomfortable to a sensitive cold sore to have the alcohol there. So I would generally prefer the tea or the dry leaf powder, or the fresh leaf if you have it close by. You could chew the leaf and hold it close to the cold sore. In another type of habitat, I would select Mojave Desert habitat, lower elevation. I would use creosote bush for that. If you don't have either, honey itself can actually be quite helpful for herpes sores. But that's a little known use for lemonade berry. So the appearance of this plant can vary considerably from location to location. This is probably on the, I don't want to say extreme end, but on the farther end of being bushy and full and square in profile. It's at least as wide as it is tall. And then in more wet areas, you may see it in wet, shady areas, see it grow taller with fewer stems that are thinner and taller, or less branching and taller. And then further south, you may see it a bit shorter, and then also having a velvety feel to the stem tips, which these do not. Well, very slightly. There's some very fine, soft hairs. But in some locations, that will appear as a yellow coating that makes it look like a fuzzy, young deer antler. You can perhaps see it a little bit. Yeah, this one right here. Those upright stems in the middle of the frame, although they're not yellow, there's more of a purplish tone beneath, but that color varies quite a bit from plant to plant and stand to stand. So when it doesn't have any leaves on it or fruit, which could be the case in the winter, here we are, second week of August, you may be able to look for that trait to help you identify it. Or there might be only one leaf on it, or a couple of fruits to help you identify it. So that's lemonade berry, Rhus trilobata, or Rhus aromatica, in the Anacardaceae family. Very abundant fruit plant throughout the Southwest that's been highly revered by native peoples for a great long time. All right, I'm going to switch off now and transition to some other plants in just a moment. We're back roadside, mid-elevation, Mojave Desert, chaparral plant community. A wide variety of shrubs here, and the plant we're going to focus on at this time is yerba santa. So this is yerba santa right in front here. bright, shiny, glossy green leaves, at least on the surface, but it helps it stand out in the landscape. So if I pan up, the bright green in the distance there is scrub oak or Gamble's oak. And then if I go up the roadside here, you can see there's more patches of yerba santa on both sides of the road. Fortunately and unfortunately, yerba santa is a plant primarily of the roadside. I say fortunately because it's easy to find by vehicle, but unfortunately because those stands may be less desirable to harvest from. Although I will say that this stand is on a very lightly traveled road that is asphalt covered. So that means that there's no dust. Just up the road a bit here, the asphalt ends and it's a dirt road, and all the plants on the side of the road are covered with a thick layer of dust since it hasn't rained here in a while, in August. So this is actually a pretty good spot to look at yerba santa. So this is Mojave Desert. This is our most widespread yerba santa. That is, it can be found, it is the only species of yerba santa to be found in Arizona. It's also barely present in southwest Utah, down into southern Nevada, where we are currently, and southern California. The genus is Eriodictyon, and if we get up close and take a look at the back side of the leaf, I don't know how good, it's not a bad shot. So you see the network of veins on the back, but also how light colored the back of the leaf is. It's woolly, hence it's aereo. So aereo is Greek, I believe, for woolly. So woolly diction, it has a network. Net-like pattern on the back. I'm trying to get the back in focus, but yeah, there we go. Net-like pattern of veination on the back side of the leaf. So stark contrast between top of the leaf. Let's see if I can. The leaves in the direct sun are now starting to point upwards, and the glare of the sun doesn't allow for much contrast. But I'm holding a leaf, the underside up against the top side of a leaf. With lower light, this contrast would be much more stark. Maybe that's a little better at that angle. You'll also notice that the midrib on the back of the leaf is raised, and it's yellow. You can also see that yellow in the new growth, the new stem growth. It's more yellow than it's green, in my opinion, and that's likewise all the way out to the tip. So if I pan out a bit and get this, so that's a really clear indicator for at least this species, Eriodictyon angustifolia. It's a really clear indicator in the field, that stark contrast between the yellow and green when the leaves are present. And this area, I would imagine, excuse me, this area, I would imagine that might be dictated by cold as much as drought. But where I've observed Eriodictyon angustifolia most closely, it is it could be green any time of the year when the conditions are suitable, when it's wet enough and warm enough. But if there's a deep freeze, the leaves can freeze off as well. So the inflorescences here have moved towards maturity. There's one dried corolla left sitting right on top of my thumb. And so here, this one's a little bit splayed open, you can make out the petals of this corolla, even though they're dried. See, there we go. Nice 5 petals. It's a little bit crinkly as well, which is indicative of its shape, even when it's fresh. These are generally white, but they can have a little lilac, lavender tint in some places. So the family is the Hydrophalaceae. However, I'm unsure if this hasn't been engulfed by the Foraginaceae. Let's just call it Hydrophalaceae. Back when they were distinct families, before there were any mergers, for me, the differentiation by and large was that they have similar flower structures and similar structures in their inflorescence. Each individual flower of the Hydrophalaceae had its stamens inserted. They didn't stick out beyond the rim of the corolla, whereas in the Boraginaceae, they stick out, kind of like antennae sticking out of the corolla, so that if you looked at it at a cross section, you would see the antennae, or the stamen, as they're called, the anthers sticking up above the flower. Just a subtle distinction that I'm not sure if it applies any longer, because they've moved those families around and I haven't kept up with it. Alright, this is a good vantage point to get a little bit of the profile shape of the inflorescence. So I think this might be still technically called a corymb. So you have, as you see, it's a single stem coming up that then branches off, and each branch has its own inflorescence. Some of the smaller ones will be below the larger ones, but each single inflorescence has its own individual stem branching off of another stem, and those are all somewhat scorpioid in shape, a slight curve to them. They're not exactly straight, and there's a slight curve. Let's see if that one illustrates that any better. You can see the persistent stigma or pistil, that is the thin filament that sticks out of the ovary, which is not the stamen, but the pistil, the female reproductive part. The other simple feature to note that the leaves are alternate, but really it's the coloration, the texture, the stark contrast between top side and bottom side of leaf, that network of veins, and then of course the smell. So if you crush a leaf, smell it, has a very pungent, sweet, pleasant aroma. One of the better smelling and tasting herbs throughout all of the Southwest, in my opinion. In fact, yerba santa can be added to tea blends simply to improve the flavor. Occasionally, really bitter teas such as sagebrush, which are in the vicinity of, or other species of Artemisia, can be, the flavor may be enhanced or smoothed out, you might say, with a bit of yerba santa, as some may use mint. I feel that the flavor of yerba santa is more mellowing and less overpowering than mint can be, at least peppermint for sure. So yerba santa has also been known as mountain balm, and I think it was called bear plant, bear medicine, bear herb, bear plant, I believe. All herbalists I know refer to it as yerba santa, all species of Eriodictyon, and the distinctions being the quality of the leaves. Are the leaves sticky and shiny, or are they all fuzzy? So here we have sticky shiny on top and slightly fuzzy underneath, as is the case with Eriodictyon californica or californicum. That is the species of commerce. If you're buying yerba santa in bulk from a herbal products company, that's the species you're getting, and it's very similar to this. It grows in California, generally at higher elevations until you get further north, and then a wee bit up into Oregon. And then, as I mentioned, we also have the soft fuzzy varieties, and those are not available in commerce, but they are relatively abundant, primarily in central and southern California. So because of the solubility of resins, which makes this species sticky, shiny, and a bit heavier, especially upon drying, the resins available in these species make them less suitable for a tea and better chewed fresh or made into a tincture. Whereas the softer, fuzzier species are a bit more water soluble in their array of constituents. Although this plant can be made into a tea, but a side-by-side comparison of the two may help illustrate. So, by and large, yerba santa is used as a remedy for the respiratory tract, the mucous membranes, and it's essentially a bronchial dilator and mild expectorant, stimulating respiratory function, enhancing breathing, clearing out phlegm throughout the upper and lower respiratory tract, such that it will benefit hay fever, seasonal allergies, acute viral infections. Also has a mild stimulating quality or diffusive quality, and when taken as a hot tea with other classic quote antiviral herbs that are used for acute viral infections, such as elder or balsam root, osha, monarda, bee balm, wild oregano, and so forth. It helps to push the infection out towards the surface. Our bodies have external defenses and then deeper internal defenses. The deeper an infection gets to deeper layers, the more compromised or potentially compromised our system can become. So I believe the fever state is a method of the body to push, make it inhospitable or more internally for the virus and push it out towards the surface, and I believe yerba santa helps facilitate that. So you can do that by eating the fresh herb, ingesting a hot tea, some tincture and hot water. The oxymel is fantastic. I cook the herb in apple cider vinegar with some additional herbs, and that has been very, very effective for many people with acute respiratory viruses. And because this species is the shiny, I'm going to go a bit more at an angle to the sun here. Because this species is the shiny, glossy, more resinous species, these resins seem to be excreted largely through the urinary tract, and so this can be helpful for an acute UTI, urinary tract infection. You might combine it with another herb in our environment here, manzanita, the leaf of manzanita, boiled as a tea, and then once you finish boiling the manzanita leaves, then add a bit of yerba santa leaf to that and let it sit covered for about 15-20 minutes. Strain and drink about a half a cup twice a day. It's also a mild digestive stimulant. Part of its stimulating properties slight bitter nature and aromatic nature. It's a carminative, so it dispels gas, dries out dampness within the gut. So I would call it a mild spleen tonic as well. Perhaps even more so as a hot tea or as an oxymel. Another thing not really mentioned about yerba santa, but it's also quite subtle, but certainly important, especially, well, you could say in the preventative stages of a viral illness as well as recuperative stages, is that yerba santa has a mild stimulating effect on the lymphatic system, both in the lungs, the respiratory system, as well as the digestive system, especially middle and upper GI, I believe. And one other thing I'll mention about yerba santa while we're here is that I like to make smudge sticks. Here's a good example of what makes a good smudge stick. So this new growth here, it's all flexible, young, sticky green growth. Harvest, put about, these are pretty thick. So if I had the smaller one, put like 6 to 9 of those together, maybe a couple of large ones to supplant a couple of the small ones. And then wrap that, put all the leaves moving the same direction, wrap that up real tight. You can even put it out in the sun a little bit and it'll bake it together, such that it actually is not the best burning smudge stick because not enough oxygen gets through there, but it does keep it together really nice. And so one of the ways I've learned to use that is blessing a new endeavor, opening up the path before you to allow for bounty, positive things to come forth and open up the way so that you can move forward in a good way with a good heart, open mind. There's a very benevolent quality, benevolent spirit within yerba santa that is very giving to the human spirit and enjoys, in my experience, seeing us come into ourselves and actualize ourselves on the earth in a beautiful and positive way, the way I believe we were meant to be. So not too surprising to me that yerba santa inhabits roadsides and likes to be as close to the human tribe as it can be, although incidentally is not the easiest to cultivate. I would otherwise have some in my yard by now. But if you're lucky and you're around a healthy stand in the rainy season, you can possibly dig up a section or a small young sprout coming out, maybe like this. I would bet that this is actually connected by the root structure over to this plant, or maybe this one here buried in the sagebrush, and tracing back a foot or two of that root and transplanting it might be as good of a chance as any, especially done in the rainy season. Soil is moist and the plant is more receptive and open. So that's a suggestion. Otherwise, once these seed heads mature, gathering seed and sowing them in disturbed soil may also be successful. So that's what I wanted to share about yerba santa, Eriodictyon angustifolium, found below the Mogollon Rim, across much of central into northwestern Arizona, into southern Nevada, southwestern Utah, and southeastern